Hello everyone. Welcome back to Shrink's Chat. I'm Annette Reiter.
And I'm Monica Burton, and we just wanted to give you a quick trigger warning to our episode on healthy sexuality.
Yep, and safety planning in families. We don't anticipate or plan on this episode triggering anyone, but when you talk about these issues, it can. And so we want everyone who's listening in to be safe, take care of yourself, tune out if you need to. We will have on our websites and Facebook page a lot of places that you can contact for help and talk to someone at 800 numbers if you should need to. But that's really not the point of this episode. We just want you to be safe and know that this can be a topic that's sensitive.
Right. So thank you for tuning in, and remember to take care of yourselves and continue to listen in on, if it's not this episode, on all of our other episodes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Shrink Chats. I'm Monica Burton.
And I'm Annette Reiter. Welcome back. And today we have our guest, Juliana Menke, a licensed mental health clinician here with Suncoast Center Incorporated here in Pinellas County. You've also, been in formats of Help a Child and various things working on prevention and helping healthy families. And today we wanted to talk with you and pick your brain about healthy sexuality and prevention and how to create healthy sexuality in the family. Welcome, Juliana Menke.
Thank you very much, Monica, Annette.
Good to have you here today. Mm-hmm. So we have been obviously noticing that this is a topic that parents have to talk about. They have some discomforts with it. Obviously, the reason we have to talk about healthy sexuality is because many of us are a little about it too. Yeah. And so we need to have conversations with our kids about them, open, healthy conversations with them, and learn to talk about this kind of mechanical process that the body does, and then also how to turn it into the mental game that we want it to be healthy choices.
Right.
I'm sure you see a lot more of this than we do. So what are some of your tidbits and tips?
Well, one of the first things I do a lot of parenting classes. So when I'm talking with parents about all aspects of parenting, I encourage them to start as young as possible in being as open as possible about sexuality. And that may sound strange. I'm not talking about having intercourse, talking to a child at 2 about that, but being able to name their body parts accurately is a beginning to the open, matter-of-fact process of being in the discussion with your child, which I urge parents to hope for a lifelong conversation so they can always be available as a resource to their kiddos about this. So things like using the accurate word for body parts instead of euphemisms, like some that I've heard would be like monkey or pocketbook or stick or popo. These are just different things that people come up with to shield themselves perhaps from being embarrassed. I urge getting a hold of some books. There's some great books, and I sent you a book list with my top 3 favorites that allow a parent to read a couple pages with their kiddos, not necessarily the entire book in one night. The one for ages 4 and up, which is called It's Not the Stork, and no, I didn't write it, and I don't get any money for this, but I just think it's an excellent resource. And it has, it's like a graphic style, so it's got a, kind of comic book style. And so it's really accessible and really simple, and parents can tweak the language if they want to. Mm-hmm. As kids grow, you've got to, in an age-appropriate way, raise your information. So you expand the knowledge. Kids in Pinellas County, in public schools in Pinellas County, typically get taught at the end of 5th grade. Okay.
Right.
5th grade is 10 and 11 years of age. Usually they start at 10 and they end at 11.
Right.
My humble opinion is that's way, way, way too late. Kids need to be informed much earlier. And one of the kind of analogies I like to use is we teach our kids how to cross a busy road as early as we can. I mean, I've known parents, I've been one of those parents, when my kid is sitting in a stroller, they're not even going to walk across the busy road, but I'm telling them how to pay attention to cross the road so that they can do it safely. The world of sexuality is a great big superhighway. And with zero information, our kids are likely to walk out and get plowed. That's just the risk of that. Mm-hmm. So when we are teaching them as matter-of-factly as possible, as genuinely as possible. If we don't know, we say, you know, I don't really know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out because I'm your parent and it's my job to find out, and then we'll talk about it together. So those are some of the openers for beginning to lay a foundation for this. Then there would be additional things that I might add in to when we talk about sexual abuse prevention, keeping a kid safe from child molesters and that kind of stuff.
One of the things that I remember reading distinctively, and I may have talked this over with you years ago, Julie, was this concept of teaching kids to talk about body parts accurately as a deterrent for sexual predators.
Yes.
That they like to talk in languages that are euphemism, that when a kid names their body parts accurately, you know, don't touch my vagina, don't touch my penis, then a predator will be less likely to want to attack such child. Is that still accurate? Does that still ring true today?
Yes, it does. Predators look for kids that they can gain access to. And one of the things that they hearken to, not every predator, so it's only some. They've interviewed some predators in prison. The resource that I had utilized for that information was quite some years back now, but a group of convicted child molesters in a prison in Minnesota. And one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things was that when kids don't know those words, that tells the child molester the parent isn't comfortable talking about it. And if the parent's reserves are down, maybe the child is more vulnerable and available for access. Because over 93% of the time, the perpetrator is known not only by the child, but by the parent as well. So parents tend to worry about strangers, creepy guys in trench coats, behind trees, near playgrounds. That's not what it looks like. It looks like average looking people walking around in our world. And it isn't always guys. 90% of the time it's a male perpetrator, 10% of the time female. That may be askew still, because for a long time there was an attitude that females can't perpetrate. Well, females, of course, they can perpetrate. And that is changing in our understanding in our world today. But yes, the accurate words elevate safety. Do they guarantee safety? No, but they elevate it, right? And we're always looking for ways to minimize access and elevate safety.
When you educate parents now, are you implementing, because I know with the digital world, it is more open for perpetrators and predators to get to kids through video games or social media or whatever. Is there like a new way that you're educating parents on how to be mindful of that and what to look out for?
Well, so part of the parenting teaching that I teach is to please, when you give your child digital access, to have parental controls from the get-go, before the child even maybe understands what digital or parental controls are. They're already implemented. So this allows the parent to have ready access to seeing what the child is looking at. If they haven't done that, then I urge parents to gently and matter-of-factly and respectfully say, we are going to implement this now because we've learned how important it is for your safety. And just like we lock the windows in our house at night and we lock the doors in our house at night, we're also going to have extra safeties on this as well. But then you get to where kids maybe have had access. Secrecy, and we've all talked about this. Secrecy is a huge essential for child molesters, whether it's digitally or in person. This is an essential ingredient of gaining access. So when a parent can find a way to eliminate the idea that secrecy is a fun, cool thing, take it out of the family language, then this can really elevate safety. And the way that I teach it is substitute surprise. Take out secrecy and put in surprise. So instead of we're going to have a secret birthday party, we're going to have a surprise birthday. Instead of we bought a present and it's a secret, it's a surprise, because a surprise always comes out in the open and is known forever. Secrets tend to be hidden and hidden and hidden. So
I think the FBI and even Interpol has put out some things for parents on what to look out for in the digital world. We can find those links and put them on our website. But I think some other tips that they've talked about is, no computer or phone in the bedroom at night.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one where parents, we need to kind of remember that we're parents first, friends like second or third,
Mm-hmm.
and set good boundaries with our kids of, what's okay and what's not okay.
What I urge parents to do is make sure that the child's phone and tablet and other devices sleep in the parent's room. So you can have them on a charger, turn them off, put them in the parent's room. If they're out like in the living room, the kitchen, some other access point, that kid gets up in the night, they're going to grab it and they're going to look at it. And then they may be on it and we may not be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do really think that that's wise. Even televisions, if you've got a TV in your kid's room, there's got to be a way to turn off the internet access at night, because I talk to parents all the time. I got up to go to the bathroom and my kid was on at 3:00 in the morning, maybe just, doing something that was innocuous, but maybe not. And kids certainly don't understand, especially younger kids, whether something is safe or not. They have no real conception of it. It's kind of like they don't understand heights, some of them, or if I run into the pool but I don't know how to swim, they're things they just don't get yet, very young kids. So they'll look at anything, if it's on the screen, they'll look at it. If they can gain access to it, they'll look at it, not realizing that it could be dangerous to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, we have that life vests on kids on boats until they're 12. Not because some 11-year-olds wouldn't be fine on the boat, but because we know most of them, 90% of them will be fine if they're after 12, if they fall off the boat in an accident. So those are ways that we've come together as a culture and said, this is the safest practice. Mm-hmm. And there's no real seatbelt here in the world of child safety with sexuality and sexual predators. So the safety belt are parents, and that's why it's so important for parents to listen in today and listen to experts like you, gather more information, read books, and look online and become informed, because they are the only seatbelt that's going to help their kid through this. And if something does go wrong, they're the people, if they're healthy, that are going to help their kid get out of it and get back to kind of as normal and typical a life as possible.
Exactly. And I love the analogy of a seatbelt, parents as a seatbelt, because that's a really great one. It doesn't necessarily prevent the accident, but it does definitely increase safety tremendously. And we can really research that. And I want to hark back a little bit to something Monica said about the FBI and Interpol and stuff. There are just mountains of resources out there. There's a whole cyber safety unit at the St. Pete Police Force, and they'll come out and train in schools about cyber safety for PTAs and stuff like that. So I think that there's just lots of resources for parents. It's just kind of grasping, yes, I do need to do this. And if I haven't done it yet, how do I do it in a calm, matter-of-fact way? Because kids will push back. Any freedoms they've had, they're going to fight to relinquish any of that, even if it's quote unquote for safety. How kids can be about that kind of thing. That's why I say do it early. Do it as early as possible.
Yeah, with my older son, when he first got a phone, I put on it's called Kids Lock. It's a safety thing where really you're only limited to text and calls. And he threw a fit, because it's like, well, none of my other friends are, this is so silly. And it's just like, as parents, we just have to like hold the boundary, because really deep down, that's what they need from us. And I think in terms of sexuality, for some parents, it's important to look at our own. I think a lot of it is also like our own thoughts and beliefs, or if there's been trauma, sexual trauma, then it's like, now that you have kids, how do you talk about that if you're triggered? And so just knowing like, this is why therapists are here to help you through this process, or parenting classes or books. And, to remember it's, not just we're helping our kids, but we're also need to look at ourselves and say, okay, how can I help myself to help my kids even better and create that open space? I tell my boys all the time, I just want you to know that you can talk to me about anything, even the uncomfortable stuff. And, I was telling you guys earlier, we've had some interesting conversations this summer about, sexuality. So I think it's just one of those things where we've got to, as parents, we have to know what are our boundaries for our family. And then, how do we kind of stay strong, especially when our kids are like, but mom or but dad, all my friends have access to this.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that I often, oh, go ahead, Annette. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just thinking of two things that we did, and my daughter's much older now, so she's off and living on her own, but that we did, and some of these came from just being a therapist practice as she was growing up, was talk about it with her, with just not only about no secrets, but also about no adult needs your help. If an adult is asking a child for a help, they probably are a dangerous adult. And what you should say is, yes, I'll help you, but I have to go get my mom or my dad now. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't try to confront them or tell them no, because that might not work very well. Just say yes, but, and go get mom or dad quickly. Mm-hmm. Because adults don't need help finding puppies. Right. As fun as that sounds. Mm-hmm. They can find puppies on their own. Plus there's a whole department that looks for puppies. So we can let, the Animal Safety Patrol do that for you. And then also we implemented a safety phrase that could be said over the phone anytime she was somewhere else. And it's simply, if she said it, it would sound innocuous to anyone listening, and we would know that that meant come and get me now. Mm-hmm. No questions asked. Come and get me now. And luckily we never got the phrase. Mm-hmm. But it is something that you can help your kid when they are away from you, because they do need to, as they grow, need to be able to have ways to implement their own safety in little rings of boundaries outside of you progressively, right? So as they grow up, and that kind of kept things comfortable. And it was a very awkward, kind of odd phrase, but nothing that anyone would have thought anything about, because nobody, not even a friend, if they heard her say it, would think that there was something weird about it. So those are things that I remember.
We have a code word in our family. So, we live pretty close to where my boys go to school, so they can walk home by themselves now, even though it makes me uncomfortable. But we implemented a code word. So if a stranger came up and said, hey, your mom, something's wrong with your mom, you need to get in the car, they know to ask for the code word. And that's something that my parents did when we were little too. And I think that that's an important way to help kids stay safe.
We also had an arrangement where if my daughter was in a situation where she needed to get out but didn't want to have to, to say I have to, she could text us and we could call her and she could blame it on us. My parents said I had to come home, and then she can blame it on us. And then there's no, it's less on her to sort of have been the one to say, I don't want to be here. Now, obviously, in the long run, we want our kids to reach adulthood and be able to say in a situation that they don't want to be in for any reason, I don't want to be here, I'm leaving. But this was like a transition towards that, so that would be more readily accessible. And I do urge parents, as their kids get older, begin the process of practicing adulthood before they're adults, because on the stroke of 18, if they choose to in our country, they can move out of the house, they can join the Marines, they can do any number of things that we might really wish they weren't doing. And if they're practicing some adulting at 16 and a half, at 17, at 17 and a half, these are times for that, so that they're still under our roof, but they're practicing. One of the things that I think is really important to practice is running your own medical examination, being the one in charge of it. Even if parent is in the room, the child is the one in charge of asking questions, what's going next, what's happening now, what's this for, et cetera, et cetera. And that would include the examination of the genital area, of course. One of the things I tell parents is doctors don't touch kids just for fun. They never just touch them. They examine them. And that word examine is really important in the room, because there are doctors in this world, very few, but there are few that are bad apples. My dad was a doctor, so I know that there are great doctors out there, But I also know that every now and then there's a bad apple. But they do an examination, not just random touching. And I think as kids get older, they need to be in charge of that. What's this injection for? What is this vaccine for? What is this medication for? Whatever it is. And they run their exam like we would expect them to as an adult. So just more ways to turn up safety and pass the baton as they get older. So when they're really, really little, we totally run the exam. But as they get older, we start to transition. And there are a lot of other things like that, that we transition over.
I think it's a great time to come back and talk a little bit more about how to developmentally talk about safety planning and healthy sexuality as kids grow up when we get back. We're going to take a little break and thank our sponsors for supporting our show today.
Mm-hmm. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and go subscribe to our YouTube channel, Shrink Chats.
Shrinks Chat is proudly sponsored by St. Petersburg Therapy, providing counseling for individuals, couples, and groups for over 20 years. Now offering the convenience of telemed, online meeting for your health and safety. For more information, visit online at stpetersburgtherapy.com.
Monica Burton is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in St. Petersburg, Florida, with over 17 years of experience. Monica offers individual, family, and couples therapy, and during this time of COVID-19 is offering teletherapy. Monica invites you to check out her YouTube channel, where she offers great tips and advice on relationships, parenting, family health, resolving conflict, and coping with stress. Go to YouTube to find Monica Burton LMFT. There are new segments every Thursday. Or check out Monica's website at monicaburtonlmft.com.
What if you could train your brain to think healthier thoughts? Cope Notes uses daily text messages to help you do exactly that. All you need is a cell phone and a brain. To learn more and try it for yourself, visit www.copenotes.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for listening to our show today with Julie, all about healthy sexuality, and welcome back to listening. Thanks again for being here, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you both.
So I think it would be great to kind of keep going with where we left off with, how to help parents go through. And we know, Julie, what we're trying to crunch down today in our show is your probably 8-hour lecture in a 45-minute spot, the highlights of it,
Okay.
Parenting, healthy sexuality, and how to kind of change the language developmentally as children age up, and talk about healthy sexuality in a family and how to do that. Parents have so much shame in this conversation. I hear it regularly in my room. Is it really time to talk about that with my kids? And I'm like, yeah. I think you're finding signs of wet dreams. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I do. So a lot of times I'm able to be teaching this in the context of a parenting class. So that does give me some preliminary what's the word I'm after here? Connection with the parents that I've already connected with them on other aspects. But, in a nutshell, so there are several things that perpetrators do to gain access. One is to create alone time. So whenever we can minimize or eliminate one-on-one alone time, that elevates safety. So that's one thing for parents to think about. We talked about secrecy versus surprise. So that's the second on my list. Understanding that because someone has position or power, that does not equal safe with children. Okay, just because someone has a title with their name, they have a lot of money, they have a position of respect in the community, whatever it is, these things do not equal safe with a child. And when those people use that position or power to push for time with a child, they are raising a red flag. That's what I call it, is raising a red flag. So that abuse of position and power, very closely connected to that is protecting a program. We've seen a lot of this, some examples that I can think of would be within the Boy Scouts, protecting the program of the Boy Scouts by not talking about perpetrators within, protecting you know, within Olympics, you know, not talking about the perpetrator within, Jerry Sandusky at Penn State. All of those are examples recently, well, fairly recently, of where the program was what was really being protected. The perpetrator was too, but the program was trying to protect themselves. People who use sexualized language to talk about children. They talk about their development, whether they're going to need a bra, whether they're going to start needing to wear a jock. They're constantly commenting on a child's body. That raises a red flag. People who touch children in ways that make children uncomfortable. And I think we've all probably seen a child that's pulling away from someone who's touching them because they don't want to be touched. And so that's a red flag. The grooming, you know, we could probably do 8 hours on grooming behaviors, you know, but grooming behaviors. Right. And then people who blur their roles, who step outside of their given role, whatever it is. The example I tend to use was teachers. A couple of the teachers over in Hillsborough County, who also happen to be female perpetrators, would do things outside of teaching. You know, so they would give rides after school or invite people over to their house, and that is a way that they're blurring that role. So those are the kind of the things that I talk about, but in somewhat more depth when I'm doing a training, you know, that's a 2-hour or 3-hour training on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are some, go ahead, Monica.
I was just going to say probably what you're going to say. Those are some good tips and really kind of concrete things to think about. I think as parents, we can be often like, what do we do? How do we think of this? And we also don't want to necessarily like jump right to like, oh my gosh, this is a perpetrator. But at the same time, we do need to be aware of those things because you don't know. And like you said, more often than not, perpetrators are someone in a position of power, or that we make the assumption would be a good person, a safe person, and they're not. Perpetrators put themselves in those positions to have easier access. Coaches, you know, doctors, religious leaders, you know, just, you know, so it's important to be aware of those things.
Yes, with a statistic like 93% known, I think that really needs to put parents clearly in charge of the safety belt on this and to step up to that responsibility and own that accountability. I want to speak a little bit more to grooming, just because I think in general, I keep hearing from people they've never even heard of what grooming is and what it looks like. And the word, when I say grooming, I'm like, oh, so that sounds like there was some grooming happening, or that looks like signs of grooming. And I get a lot of my clients who have just never heard of this. So I think everything you said, I think most people have heard of, but grooming might be a therapy. I mean, we talk like this all the time, and it's hard to imagine how new some of these concepts are to people because they're our regular day world, our jobs. So can you speak a little bit more to grooming? I mean, certainly I have ideas, but you deal with this all the time.
Yeah, no problem at all. So probably the easiest starting place is almost every parent will tell their child, don't take candy from a stranger. That's like a given, you know? So then beyond, that's a potential grooming thing. To offer a child candy, and that is an enticement. So when I talk about grooming, what I'm talking about is what can entice a child, what can gain the child's interest, gain a kind of smooth out any uncertainties with the child. And interestingly, a lot of the more established perpetrators, or the ones who are working, you know, who have been at it a lot longer, they groom the adult as well. Okay, so they give things to the family that will gain access to the family, that may bring them access to one of the children. A lot of times people think perpetrators are very type specific. Oh, it's got to be, you know, a little blonde boy who's 3 years old. Well, the main thing is access. Can they get near a kid? And most perpetrators will access whatever kid they can get near. So other things that can be woven into grooming, for example, Jerry Sandusky at Penn State, when he was grooming, there would be things that he would give cash money. That was something he would give. Shoes and other game gear, because he was an assistant coach for the football team. Tickets to the games, trips to the games, promises of you will play on Penn State football team. These are all things that are enticements for kids. Now, his target age was in teens more than little kids. And that's not entirely surprising, because a lot of his perpetration took place on campus in the locker room. So it's kind of a grooming would be anything that can entice or lure a child and or gain access to the whole family as well. So those can be, and that list of 17 lures, pets can be a lure, you know. Games are a really hot lure these days. I mean, you know, I've got the latest whatever game, you know, I've got the next level. We can play games, come to my house. This is a lure that can be utilized when it's an older child sometimes, because a lot of parents are less wary of older children reaching out towards younger children. I'm a survivor myself, and in both of the cases from my own childhood, it was an older child, and the stronger and bigger didn't really matter. It was the older. I looked up to them. I thought, oh, they're older than me. They say that this is okay. This is what older people do with little kids. So, and I was a child of the 60s. My very loving, wonderful parents were just completely uninformed. You know, they just didn't have any information about this, or their information was, well, just don't talk about it. You know, that was kind of an information from the 60s, unfortunately. So those are some fame and fortune. That's a big lure these days. That's a huge lure these days. They've done studies with adults about, can you get an adult to get in a car with strangers when you're going to have a screen test for some TV show? In New York City, they did this. They didn't even try to get access to kids. They were just trying to see if they could get adults to get in a car with strangers. Sure enough, they had tremendous success with that. So even adults are enticed by fame and fortune. So those are some of them, yeah.
And kids and families are so goal-oriented to getting to colleges now, and getting scholarships, because colleges are so expensive. And, you know, obviously if your kid's been playing tennis or playing volleyball or whatever they've been doing all these years, and the coach wants to talk to them alone and wants to work with them alone, even though they're in high school, it's a lure and fame, and, you know, this is what you've been working for. So you feel so close. I mean, I jokingly put a post up the other day that the CEO of Bank of America wants to send me $65 million. He just needs a check for $350 from me. I think if I'm going to bring $65 million to the bank, I don't need 350 to set that account up. But nonetheless,
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, there's always that little bit like, oh, wouldn't it be great if this was real? You know, like,
Sure.
oh, how nice to get, right? So that fame and fortune and financial security that might be promised or, you know, dreamed of, and which makes probably even like ministers or priests or reverends or church folks very luring, because again, there's that concept of salvation.
Sure. And nobody who the idea that nobody who believes in God, who works for a church would ever do anything bad to a kid. That, you know, has played out very poorly across the world over the last many decades that we can look at, and possibly for centuries, you know.
So we'll put up these 17 lures for child molesters just so people have them, but also just to remember to think about what this is and to be on the lookout of it. We're not trying to scare people. We're trying to make them aware. The world becomes less scary the more aware and educated you are. And actually, you're able to keep your kids safer by knowing these kind of things.
It's one of those things where you focus on what's in your control instead of what's out of your control, like we've said on many other podcasts, you know, and to face the fear of, okay, this is happening. We can't be in total denial. And so how can we best prepare ourselves and our kids? You know?
Exactly. One of the things that even caused me to want to train about this information was so many parents early in my career saying, I didn't know this behavior was a red flag behavior. I didn't want to accuse somebody falsely of being a child molester. I didn't know what to say. So when I'm doing the actual training class with parents, we practice. How can you respond? If someone is picking your kid up and your kid doesn't want to be picked up, what can you say in a non-accusatory way that still sets a boundary, you know? And this can be really challenging, but if a parent has never, ever done it, it's harder to do than if you've at least done it once or twice. And if you've done it once or twice, you've got a little bit of practice under your belt. And I always tell parents too, you know, if it isn't broken, then we don't need to fix it. If you've got a way to handle this, handle it, you know. It's just if you're not sure or if you haven't, and I've had enough people tell me I didn't know what to do, so I didn't do anything. So and then, you know, there they are with their kid having unfortunately survived a molestation experience. The other piece I always add is this is 100% survivable for the kid, for the parent, for the family. And I also emphasize the parent is the leader. The parent is the leader on a lot of things. It's not just surviving very hard, tragic experiences or difficult experiences, but the leader in, you know, how we handle our phones and how we handle our, you know, online behaviors and all that kind of stuff. One of the things I think that you said to me early on, Annette, I can't remember when, but it's like our digital responsibility. And I always that stuck in my mind. We have a digital responsibility to still have integrity in the world. It's not just face to face, it's digitally as well. And but coming back to the topic at hand, just helping parents to understand that this is survivable. Many parents I've met discover, even if they didn't totally understand it, that they themselves are survivors. I think a lot of folks get deep into adulthood not even realizing that certain things that happened to them as kids were actually molestation experiences. They don't even know that that's what you call it, you know? It gets normalized, it gets built into their framework, and they just live with it, you know? It kind of pokes out in other places, and that's why they end up in a therapist's office, you know?
What you're speaking of to me just resonates with this concept that as parents and as adults, we're trying to find ways to have agency about our own self, our own body, our own history, our own experiences. And by doing that, we're also trying to simultaneously help our children and the children of the world find their own agency about their own self, their own body, and their own experiences. And because this can be kind of new language, sometimes uncles or aunts or relatives don't understand why when a 4-year-old says, I don't want to be tickled anymore, that needs to be respected and listened to and heard, and the behavior needs to stop. Not because the tickling right then and there was that horrible, but just more that we want a person to feel like they have agency over what happens to their body, and that they have rights to what happens to their body, and they have rights to ask that it stops. And then in our family, we're going to respect that. Our family is a safe place that we respect that.
And even more than just respect it, participate in the creation of it. So the tickler can be a part of the family that says, I get this. You choose if we play tickle games or not. And you choose when we stop. And that helps that person. They don't have to give up tickling necessarily. They have to ask for permission, you know? And this is something that, gosh, I mean, little teeny tiny babies, everybody in the world wants to touch those babies, you know? They want to all go out in the grocery store, complete strangers, a little different in COVID times, but you know. And so I practice with parents on things that they can say that are true to who they are, that still stop the touching, you know. And these days you can just say COVID, but you know, there's going to be times after COVID, and there were times before. So
right.
Yeah.
Right.
We hope, Julie.
We believe.
Well, we probably need to wrap up. We want to thank Julie Menke, our guest with Suncoast Center, helping us talk about healthy sexuality. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you,
You're
Julie, for
welcome.
being here and helping us understand the importance of really talking to our kids.
Thank you both for having me. And if anyone is having a situation where they need the kind of help that Suncoast offers, we do offer support for families where there's been a molestation experience. We have groups that help parents along. We have groups that help the kids along. So they can reach out to me directly, or they can just call Suncoast and ask for our trauma team, and we'll help them out. And those services are free for those as needed. So.
And we will also put links to that on all of our social media and our website, so anyone has access to it.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Please
Julie.
check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and our new YouTube channel. And thanks for listening to our podcast, folks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.